The elevator door opened, and Dahlia Zimmerman walked straight into a solid wall of expensive suit and masculine cologne, her coffee splashing against a crisp white dress shirt before she could stop the momentum. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." She jumped back, horrified, watching the dark liquid seep into what had to be a $1,000 shirt. Her neighbor, the ridiculously handsome man from the penthouse floor, looked down at his ruined shirt with an expression she couldn't quite read. "It's fine," he said, his voice deep and measured. "These things happen." Dahlia fumbled in her bag for tissues, finding only a crumpled napkin. "No, it's really not fine. I wasn't looking where I was going, and let me pay for the dry cleaning, or the shirt, whatever you need." He waved her off, stepping past her into the elevator. "Don't worry about it." His eyes met hers briefly, and she felt her stomach do an unexpected flip. Dark brown eyes, sharp jawline, the kind of face that belonged on magazine covers. She'd seen him around their building a few times over the past month since she'd moved in, always looking preoccupied, always impeccably dressed. This was the most they'd ever spoken. The elevator doors closed before she could say anything else, and Dahlia stood there feeling like an absolute disaster. Perfect. Just perfect. She'd finally had a conversation with her mysterious neighbor, and she'd literally thrown coffee at him. She made her way down to the lobby, already late for her shift at the botanical garden where she worked as a horticulturist. The day didn't improve much from there. 2 of the greenhouse plants showed signs of fungal infection. The new intern accidentally overwatered an entire section of succulents, and her ex-boyfriend sent her 3 texts asking if they could talk about giving things another try. The answer was no, had been no for the 6 months since she'd caught him having dinner with his just a friend, who turned out to be significantly more than that. By the time Dahlia got home that evening, she was exhausted. She kicked off her dirt-stained sneakers, dropped her bag, and was about to collapse on her couch when someone knocked on her door. She opened it to find her neighbor standing there, changed into a black t-shirt and jeans that somehow made him look even more attractive than the suit had. He held a manila folder in his hands. "Hi," he said. "I'm Quentin Lawson from upstairs, Dahlia Zimmerman, the coffee thrower." She felt her cheeks heat. "Again, I'm really sorry about this morning. I told you it's fine." He held up the folder. "Actually, I'm here because I think there's been a mix-up. This was delivered to my place, but it has your name on it." Dahlia took the folder, frowning. "That's weird. I wasn't expecting anything." She opened it to find information about tutoring services, rate sheets, and a welcome packet. "This is really weird. I never signed up for any tutoring agency." Quentin's expression shifted, something like understanding crossing his features. "What do you do for work?" "I'm a horticulturist. I work at the Riverside Botanical Gardens." He ran a hand through his dark hair, looking slightly embarrassed. "I think I know what happened. I hired a tutoring agency to send someone for my daughter. They must have gotten the apartment numbers confused. You have a daughter, Sophie. She's 8. Struggling with reading comprehension, and I thought having someone come to the apartment a few times a week might help." He paused. "This morning, when I saw you in the hallway, I thought you were the tutor arriving early. I was heading down to my car, but I was going to come back up to meet you properly." Dahlia couldn't help but smile. "So you thought I was the tutor, and I attacked you with coffee." "Something like that." The corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "Not the best first impression on either side." "Well, good luck with finding the actual tutor. I hope they have better coordination than I do." Quentin nodded, taking back the folder. "Thanks, and welcome to the building officially." After he left, Dahlia leaned against her door, surprised to find herself disappointed that the conversation had ended. She'd been in the building for a month and had barely talked to anyone. There was something about Quentin Lawson that intrigued her beyond just his obvious good looks. Maybe it was the way he'd been so gracious about the coffee incident, or the fact that he was a single dad trying to help his daughter with school. She wondered briefly what had happened to Sophie's mother, then told herself it was none of her business. The next morning, Dahlia was more careful with her coffee, holding it securely as she waited for the elevator. When the doors opened, Quentin was already inside with a little girl who had to be Sophie. She had her father's dark hair, pulled into 2 braids, and was clutching a sparkly purple backpack. "Good morning," Dahlia said, stepping inside. "Morning," Quentin replied. Sophie looked up at Dahlia with curious eyes. "Are you the plant lady?" Sophie asked. Dahlia blinked. "I mean, I do work with plants. How did you know?" "I saw you yesterday carrying those big pots with the flowers. They were really pretty. What kind were they?" "Those were dahlias, actually. Same name as me. They're some of my favorites." Sophie's eyes widened. "Your name is Dahlia." "Like the flower." "Exactly like the flower." "That's so cool. I wish I had a flower name." "Sophie is a beautiful name," Dahlia said. "But if it helps, there's a plant called saphora. It has really pretty yellow flowers." The little girl beamed, and Dahlia caught Quentin watching her with an expression she couldn't quite identify. The elevator reached the lobby and they all stepped out. "Have a great day at school," Dahlia said to Sophie. "Thanks. Maybe I can see the plant with my name sometime." "Sophie," Quentin said gently, "I'm sure Dahlia is very busy. Actually, we have saphora trees at the garden. If your dad ever brings you by, I'd be happy to show you." Sophie looked up at her father with pleading eyes. "Can we, Dad, please?" "We'll see," Quentin said, but he smiled at Dahlia. "Thank you." As Dahlia walked to the bus stop, she found herself hoping they would come by. There was something sweet about Sophie's enthusiasm and something magnetic about Quentin's quiet intensity. She'd moved to this city for a fresh start after her breakup, determined to focus on her career and her own growth. Romance hadn't been part of the plan. But then again, plans changed. 3 days later, Dahlia was giving a tour to a group of elementary school students when she spotted Quentin and Sophie near the tropical plants section. Sophie saw her first and waved enthusiastically. "Dahlia, you're here." Dahlia excused herself from the group, letting her colleague take over for a moment. "Hi, you came. Dad said we could come on Saturday," Sophie said. "He doesn't work on Saturdays." "Well, sometimes he does, but not today." Quentin looked slightly apologetic. "She's been talking about the saphora tree all week. I figured I should make good on the promise before she drove me completely crazy." "I'm glad you came. Let me show you around." Dahlia led them through the gardens, pointing out different plants and flowers. Sophie asked a million questions, absorbing information like a sponge. Quentin followed quietly, occasionally asking questions of his own that showed he was paying attention to more than just the plants. When they reached the saphora tree, Sophie stood in front of it with reverence. "It's beautiful." "It's also called a Japanese pagoda tree," Dahlia explained. "They're really hardy and can live for a very long time." "Like how long?" "Some of them live for over 100 years. Sophie's eyes went wide. "Wow, that's older than Dad." Quentin laughed, and the sound did something warm to Dahlia's chest. "Thanks for that reminder, Soph." After the tour, as they were walking toward the exit, Sophie tugged on her father's sleeve. "Dad, I'm thirsty. Can I get something from the vending machine?" Quentin handed her some coins, and Sophie ran ahead to the machine near the entrance. He turned to Dahlia. "Thank you for this. She had a really good time." "I did too. She's a great kid." "She is." He paused, seeming to consider something. "The tutor from the agency started this week." "She's nice, competent, but Sophie keeps comparing her to you. Apparently you set a high bar with the flower names." Dahlia felt herself flush. I'm sure she'll warm up to her actual tutor. Probably. Quentin met her eyes. Can I ask you something, and feel free to say no? Sure. Would you want to have coffee sometime? With me, I mean. Not thrown at me, but actual coffee, sitting down, having a conversation. Dahlia's heart kicked up its pace. I would love that. Tomorrow. There's a place downtown that supposedly has the best coffee in the city. I can pick you up around 10. That sounds perfect. Sophie came running back with a bottle of lemonade, chattering about all the plants she wanted to tell her friends about at school. As Dahlia watched them leave, she couldn't stop smiling. She hadn't expected this when she'd moved into her new apartment. She definitely hadn't expected to meet someone like Quentin Lawson. The next morning, Dahlia changed her outfit 4 times before settling on a simple green sundress and sandals. When Quentin knocked on her door at exactly 10, she took a deep breath before opening it. He looked good. Dark jeans, a gray button-down with the sleeves rolled up, casual but still put together. His eyes swept over her and she saw appreciation in them. You look beautiful, he said. Thanks. You clean up pretty well yourself. No coffee stains this time, he grinned. I'm counting that as a win. The coffee shop was a small, intimate place with exposed brick walls and the rich aroma of freshly ground beans. They ordered, then found a table near the window. Conversation flowed easily. Dahlia learned that Quentin owned a commercial real estate development company that he'd built from the ground up over the past 12 years. He'd started with nothing, worked construction jobs to save money, then bought his first property at 25 and flipped it. 1 property became 2, then 5, then 20. Now his company, Lawson Development Group, was worth millions and handled major projects throughout the state. I grew up with nothing, he said, stirring his coffee. Single mom, 3 jobs, barely keeping the lights on. I swore I'd build something stable, something that would last. You definitely did that, Dahlia said. A multi-million-dollar company is pretty stable, he shrugged. The money is nice, but it was never really about that. It was about security. Making sure Sophie never has to worry the way I did growing up. Where's her mom? Dahlia asked, then immediately regretted it. Sorry, that's too personal. It's okay. Her name was Jennifer. We were young, not really ready for a kid, but we tried to make it work. She passed away when Sophie was 2, car accident. Dahlia's hand moved across the table, covering his. I'm so sorry. It was 6 years ago. We've learned to live with it, but it's been just the 2 of us for a long time. She's my whole world. She's lucky to have you. Quentin turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers. What about you? What's your story? Dahlia told him about growing up in a small town, her love for plants starting with her grandmother's garden. She'd studied horticulture in college, worked at a few different gardens, then finally landed her dream job here at Riverside. She mentioned her ex briefly, the betrayal, the decision to start fresh. His loss, Quentin said firmly. Completely his loss. They talked for 2 hours, until Dahlia noticed the time and realized she'd told her best friend Mara she'd help her move some furniture that afternoon. I should go, she said reluctantly. But this was really nice. It was. Quentin paid the bill despite her protests. Can I see you again? Maybe dinner this time. I'd really like that. They set a date for Wednesday evening, and Quentin drove her back to their building. In the elevator, the air felt charged with possibility. When they reached her floor, Dahlia turned to say goodbye and found Quentin looking at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. I'm glad you threw coffee on me, he said. She laughed. That's definitely a first. Nobody's ever been glad about that before. It got us talking. I'd been trying to work up the nerve to introduce myself for weeks. Really, really. I'd see you in the lobby or the parking garage and I'd think about saying something, but I always chickened out. Figured you'd think I was some creepy neighbor trying to hit on you." "I definitely don't think that." Dahlia stepped closer. "For the record, I noticed you too. I thought you were way out of my league." "Not possible." His hand came up to brush a strand of hair from her face, his touch gentle. "I'll see you Wednesday." "Wednesday," she echoed. Over the next few weeks, Dahlia and Quentin fell into a pattern. Dinner dates, coffee in the mornings before work, long phone calls at night after Sophie went to bed. Dahlia learned that Quentin was driven but not ruthless, ambitious but grounded. He donated quietly to causes he believed in, treated everyone from his executives to his building's doorman with the same respect, and talked about his daughter with a tenderness that melted Dahlia's heart. Sophie started joining them sometimes. Weekend breakfast at the diner down the street, trips to the park, movie nights in Quentin's apartment that was significantly larger than Dahlia's one bedroom. The penthouse was beautiful, modern and spacious with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. But it also felt lived in, comfortable. Sophie's artwork covered the fridge, books and toys scattered around the living room, photos of her at various ages lining the mantel. One evening, about 6 weeks after their first coffee date, Dahlia was helping Sophie with a school project about plants. They were creating a poster board with different pressed flowers and leaves, labeling each one. Quentin was in the kitchen making dinner, and Dahlia could hear him humming along to the music playing from the speaker. "You like my dad?" Sophie asked suddenly. Dahlia looked up, surprised. "What do you mean? Do you like him the way people like each other in movies? When they want to kiss and stuff?" Dahlia felt her cheeks heat. "I do like your dad, very much." Sophie considered this seriously. "He likes you too, I can tell. He smiles more now. He used to be sad sometimes when he thought I wasn't looking, but now he's happy." "I'm glad he's happy." "Me too." Sophie went back to gluing a maple leaf to the poster board. "I think it would be cool if you were around more, all the time." Before Dahlia could respond, Quentin called them to dinner. Over spaghetti and meatballs, Dahlia caught him watching her with that look again, the one that made her feel like she was the only person in the room. After dinner, Sophie went to get ready for bed, and Dahlia helped Quentin clean up. "She asked me if I like you," Dahlia said, drying a plate. Quentin paused in scrubbing the pot. "What did you say?" "I said I do. Very much." She set the plate down and turned to face him. "She also said you're happier now." He dried his hands on a towel and closed the distance between them. "I am happier. Happiest I've been in years, actually." His hand settled on her waist, pulling her closer. "You've completely turned my world upside down, Dahlia Zimmerman." "Is that a good thing?" "The best thing." He leaned down, his forehead resting against hers. "I know we haven't been doing this long, but I need you to know how serious I am about you, about us." "I'm serious too," she whispered. His lips found hers then, soft and questioning at first, then deeper as she responded. Dahlia's hand slid up to his shoulders, feeling the solid strength of him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing harder, Quentin's eyes were dark with emotion. "Stay tonight," he said. "Just to sleep, I mean. Sophie would love to have you here for breakfast, and I would love to wake up with you here." "Okay," Dahlia agreed. She borrowed a T-shirt to sleep in, and they lay together in Quentin's bed, talking quietly about everything and nothing. He told her about the new project his company was working on, a mixed-use development that would include affordable housing units. She told him about the rare orchid that had finally bloomed at the garden after 2 years of careful cultivation. His hand traced patterns on her arm as they talked, and eventually her eyes grew heavy. "Sleep," Quentin murmured, kissing her forehead. "I've got you." Dahlia woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the smell of bacon cooking. She found Quentin in the kitchen with Sophie, both of them working on breakfast. Sophie saw her first. "Dahlia, you're still here," Dad, she stayed. I can see that, Soph. Quentin smiled at Dahlia over his daughter's head. Good morning. How do you like your eggs? Scrambled is perfect. Dahlia moved into the kitchen, accepting the coffee Quentin handed her. This is nice. It really is, he agreed. Over the next month, staying over became more frequent. Dahlia would bring work clothes and get ready at Quentin's place, or he'd stay at her apartment, though it was cramped with his larger frame in her smaller space. They fell into domesticity easily, naturally. Quentin would pick her up from work, or she'd grab Sophie from school when he had a late meeting. They cooked together, watched movies together, built a life together in small, incremental ways. But Dahlia was also aware of the differences in their worlds. Quentin was a millionaire, running a major company, moving in circles of wealth and influence. She was a horticulturist making a comfortable but modest salary, happy with her work but not setting the world on fire. Sometimes, when they attended company events or dinners with his business associates, she felt the weight of that difference. At one particular dinner, a charity gala for a children's hospital, Dahlia sat next to Quentin in a borrowed dress, feeling out of place among the designer gowns and expensive jewelry. A woman named Victoria, sleek and polished and clearly interested in Quentin, kept steering the conversation toward business matters Dahlia knew nothing about. So Dahlia, Victoria said during a lull, her smile sharp. Quentin mentioned you work with plants. That must be so relaxing. The way she said, it made it sound like Dahlia played in the dirt for fun rather than held a professional position. Quentin's hand tightened on hers under the table. I'm a horticulturist at Riverside Botanical Gardens, Dahlia said evenly. I specialize in rare plant conservation and habitat restoration. It's challenging work but very rewarding. How nice, Victoria said dismissively, turning back to Quentin. Now, about the West Side project, I heard you're looking for investors. Later in the car on the way home, Quentin was quiet. Dahlia stared out the window, feeling the weight of the evening pressing on her. You okay? Quentin asked finally. Do you ever think about how different our lives are? He pulled the car over, turning to face her. Different how? Quentin, you're a millionaire. You own a development company, you go to galas, you have business meetings with people who wear watches that cost more than my yearly salary. And I'm a plant girl who gets dirt under her fingernails and takes the bus to work. Is that how you see yourself? Because that's not how I see you. His hand cupped her face, making her look at him. I see someone brilliant at what she does, someone passionate and caring and real. You make me laugh. You're incredible with Sophie. You make me want to leave work on time just so I can see you sooner. The money, the company, all of that is what I do. You are what makes me happy. Victoria certainly didn't see it that way. Victoria is a shark who's been circling for years, and she's never going to get what she wants. I'm not interested in someone who only cares about what I have. I want someone who cares about who I am. He leaned closer. I want you, Dahlia, just you. She kissed him then, pouring all her feelings into it. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. I want you too. I'm sorry, I just got in my head. Don't apologize. But please believe me when I tell you that you're exactly who I want to be with. They drove home, and Dahlia felt the tension ease from her shoulders. Quentin had a way of making her feel grounded, secure. She trusted him, trusted what they were building together. 2 months later, on a Saturday morning, Dahlia woke up in Quentin's bed to find his side empty. She padded out to the living room to find him sitting on the couch, looking at something on his laptop with a concerned expression. Everything okay? She asked. He looked up, then closed the laptop. Come here. She settled next to him and he pulled her close. I need to tell you something and I should have told you sooner. Dahlia's stomach tightened. Okay, the company is expanding. We're opening a new office on the West Coast and it's a major project. I'm going to need to be there for extended periods over the next year, maybe a week or two at a time, multiple trips. Oh, she processed this. That's a big deal. It is. And I've been trying to figure out how to make it work, how to balance being there for the project and being here for Sophie and for you. He turned to face her fully. Come with me. What? On the trips, come with me. I know you have your job and I wouldn't ask you to give that up, but maybe you could take some time off or work remotely when possible. I want you there. I need you there. Quentin, I can't just leave my job for weeks at a time. What if you didn't have to worry about the job? He spoke quickly, urgently. What if I funded a research project for you at the garden, something that would give you more flexibility? Or what if we started a conservation program together, something you could run on your own terms? Dahlia pulled back slightly. You want to pay me to come with you? No, that's not what I meant. I'm saying this wrong. He ran his hands through his hair, frustrated. I'm not trying to buy you or your time. I'm trying to find a solution where we can be together, where you can still do the work you love but we don't have to be apart for weeks at a time. It sounds like you're trying to fix my life with money. That's not what I'm doing. I'm trying to build a life with you. There's a difference. They stared at each other, the first real argument hanging between them. Dahlia stood up, needing space to think. I need some air, she said. She got dressed and left the apartment, walking through the city streets without a clear destination. Her phone buzzed multiple times with texts from Quentin, but she ignored them. She ended up at the botanical gardens, finding comfort in the familiar paths and green spaces. Mara found her an hour later, sitting in the succulent greenhouse. Quentin called me. Said you two had a fight and you might be here. He wants me to quit my job and follow him around the country. Is that what he said, or is that what you heard? Dahlia looked at her friend. What's the difference? Well, what did he actually say? Dahlia recounted the conversation, and Mara listened carefully. Sounds to me like he's trying to find a way to keep you both in his life. That's not necessarily a bad thing. But he's using money to solve the problem. He's a millionaire, babe. Money is a tool he has available. If I had that kind of money, and the person I loved had a conflict between their job and being with me, I'd try to find a solution too. Mara sat down next to her. The question is, do you want to be with him? Because if you do, you're going to have to figure out how to navigate the money thing. It's part of who he is. I do want to be with him. I love him. It was the first time she'd said it out loud, and the truth of it settled in her chest. I'm in love with him. Then go tell him that, and figure out the rest together. Dahlia went back to the apartment building, taking the elevator up to the penthouse. She used the key Quentin had given her weeks ago, letting herself in. She found him in Sophie's room, sitting on the edge of her bed, reading a story. Sophie was curled up with her stuffed animals, looking sleepy. Quentin looked up when Dahlia appeared in the doorway, and the relief in his eyes was palpable. She waited while he finished the story and tucked Sophie in, then followed him to the bedroom. I'm sorry, they both said at the same time. Quentin gestured for her to go first. Dahlia took a breath. I overreacted. You were trying to find a solution and I made it about something it wasn't. I think I was scared. Of what? Of losing myself in your world. Of becoming someone who's just attached to you because of what you have, not who you are. I don't want to be that person. Quentin pulled her close. You could never be that person. You're too stubborn and independent and sure of yourself. That's part of why I love you. Dahlia's heart stopped. You love me. I love you. I'm completely, absolutely in love with you, Dahlia. I have been for weeks, maybe since you threw that coffee on me. He smiled slightly. I should have said it sooner, but I was afraid of scaring you off. I love you too, she said, the words spilling out. I love you so much it terrifies me sometimes. He kissed her then, deep and thorough, holding her like she was precious. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Quentin rested his forehead against hers. "We'll figure out the West Coast thing," he said. "Together. Maybe you can come on some trips, but not all of them. Maybe we do long distance for the stretches where you can't come. We'll make it work because I'm not losing you." "We'll make it work," Dahlia agreed. They did figure it out. Dahlia talked to her supervisor at the garden about a more flexible schedule, taking on some consulting work that allowed her to work remotely part of the time. She went on 2 of Quentin's trips over the next few months, spending her days exploring the West Coast botanical gardens and her evenings with him. When she couldn't go, they video called every night, and he always came home with stories and small gifts for both her and Sophie. Sophie's reading comprehension improved dramatically with her tutor, and Dahlia helped by reading with her on the evenings she was there. The 3 of them became a unit, a family in all but official terms. Dahlia kept her own apartment for a while, maintaining that piece of independence, but she spent most nights at the penthouse. Her plants slowly migrated upward, filling Quentin's windows with greenery. 6 months after their first coffee date, on a Saturday afternoon at the botanical gardens, Quentin asked her to marry him. They were standing under the safflower tree, Sophie holding a bouquet of dahlias, and when Dahlia said yes, Sophie cheered so loudly that birds scattered from the nearby trees. The ring was beautiful, a simple diamond that caught the light, but what mattered more was the way Quentin looked at her. Like she was his whole world, the way she'd become over these months of learning to love him. They got married 3 months later in a small ceremony at the gardens, surrounded by flowers and close friends. Sophie was the flower girl, taking her job very seriously, and Dahlia's grandmother cried happy tears. Quentin stood at the altar looking at Dahlia like she'd hung the moon, and when they exchanged vows, his voice was steady and sure. "I promise to love you in all your seasons," he said. "To weather the storms and celebrate the sunshine. To build a life with you that's rooted in trust and grown with care. You and Sophie are my everything, and I will spend every day making sure you know it." Dahlia's own vows were simpler, but no less heartfelt. "I promise to choose you, every day in every way. To stand beside you, to grow with you, to love you exactly as you are. You've given me a family, a home, a love I didn't know I was looking for. I'm so grateful I threw that coffee on you." Laughter rippled through the small crowd, and Quentin grinned. When the officiant pronounced them married, he kissed her like they were the only 2 people in the world. The reception was held in the garden's event space, intimate and warm. Sophie gave a toast that she'd clearly practiced, talking about how happy her dad was now and how much she loved having Dahlia as her new mom. Dahlia's eyes welled up, and Quentin squeezed her hand under the table. They honeymooned in Hawaii, a week of beaches and relaxation and falling even more in love. Quentin's phone stayed mostly off, work a distant concern. They talked about the future, about the family they wanted to build, about dreams and hopes and all the years stretching ahead of them. When they got back, Dahlia officially moved into the penthouse, giving up her smaller apartment. They converted one of the spare rooms into a home office for her, with perfect lighting for her plants and space for her research. Quentin's company continued to grow, but he made a point of being present, of not letting work consume him the way it had before Dahlia and Sophie came into his life. A year after the wedding, Dahlia started feeling tired all the time. She assumed it was stress, the combination of work and family and life. But when the fatigue persisted and she started feeling nauseous in the mornings, Mara suggested she take a pregnancy test. She stared at the positive result for a full minute before it sank in. She was pregnant. They were going to have a baby. Quentin was at a meeting when she called him, and she could hear the concern in his voice when he answered. "Everything okay? Everything's perfect. Can you come home? I'm on my way," she told him in their bedroom, watching his face carefully. They talked about having more kids, but always in vague, future terms. This was real and immediate and would change everything. Quentin's expression went through several emotions before landing on pure joy. He picked her up and spun her around, then immediately set her down carefully. "Sorry, should I not do that? Is that okay? Are you okay?" Dahlia laughed, tears streaming down her face. "I'm okay. We're okay." They told Sophie that night at dinner. She shrieked with excitement, immediately launching into plans for teaching her new sibling everything she knew. Dahlia and Quentin exchanged amused glances over her head, both of them overwhelmed with happiness. The pregnancy was smooth, if tiring. Quentin became even more protective, fussing over her in ways that were endearing and occasionally annoying. He cut back on travel, delegating more to his executives so he could be home. He came to every doctor's appointment, his hand holding hers tightly as they watched the ultrasounds and heard the heartbeat. They found out they were having a boy, and Sophie immediately started making lists of names. They settled on Oliver James Lawson, and Quentin's eyes were suspiciously bright when they made it official. Dahlia worked as long as she could, eventually transitioning to consulting from home in her last trimester. She nested obsessively, organizing and reorganizing the nursery, washing tiny clothes, and reading every parenting book she could find. Quentin would find her at odd hours, standing in the nursery doorway, and he'd wrap his arms around her from behind, his hand on her belly, feeling their son kick. Oliver was born on a sunny May morning, after 14 hours of labor that Quentin coached her through with surprising calm. When the doctor placed their son in her arms, Dahlia looked down at his tiny, perfect face and felt her heart expand in ways she hadn't known were possible. Quentin cried, which made her cry, and when Sophie came to the hospital to meet her baby brother, she held him with such gentle reverence that Dahlia took about 100 photos. The first few months were exhausting and wonderful and challenging. Quentin took paternity leave, something his executives were shocked by, and threw himself into fatherhood with the same dedication he brought to everything else. He learned to change diapers with efficiency, mastered the art of the 3 a.m. feeding, and spent hours just holding Oliver and talking to him about everything and nothing. Dahlia watched him sometimes, this powerful man who commanded boardrooms and closed million-dollar deals, singing lullabies to their son in the middle of the night, and fell in love with him all over again. Sophie was an incredible big sister, always wanting to help, reading to Oliver even though he was too young to understand. She'd graduated from her tutor, reading at an advanced level now, and she credited both the tutor and all the reading practice with Dahlia. Life settled into a new normal. Dahlia went back to work part-time at the gardens, consulting on special projects and running a conservation program that Quentin had indeed funded, though they'd navigated that conversation carefully. It was a partnership, not a handout, with the garden maintaining control while Lawson Development Group provided financial backing. The program flourished, protecting endangered plant species and educating the public. Quentin's company continued to expand, but he maintained boundaries that protected family time. Dinner together every night when possible, weekends reserved for them, bedtime stories for both kids. He'd learned to delegate, to trust his team to not carry everything himself. On their second wedding anniversary, they returned to the Saphora tree at the Botanical Gardens. Oliver was toddling around, Sophie chasing him to keep him from eating leaves. Quentin pulled Dahlia close, kissing her temple. "Happy anniversary, Mrs. Lawson." Happy anniversary." She leaned into him, watching their children play. "Did you ever imagine this? When I threw coffee on you that morning? Honestly? No. I thought you were going to be my daughter's tutor. I was stressed about a dozen work things, and I was just trying to get through the day." He turned her to face him. "But I'm so glad you weren't the tutor. I'm so glad you were just my neighbor. Because this, right here, this is everything I didn't know I needed. We should send that tutoring agency a thank you card for mixing up the apartment numbers." Quentin laughed. Best mistake they ever made. 3 years later, they added a daughter to their family, Rose, named after Dahlia's grandmother. The penthouse felt full of life and love and noise, exactly the way they both wanted it. Quentin cut back his hours even more, promoting a deputy to handle day-to-day operations while he focused on strategic planning. He was still involved, still building his company's legacy, but it no longer consumed him. Sophie started high school, somehow both still his little girl and rapidly becoming a young woman. She talked about maybe studying environmental science, influenced by all those years of Dahlia showing her plants and explaining ecosystems. Oliver was in preschool, obsessed with trucks and dinosaurs, and Rose was a toddler whirlwind who kept them all on their toes. Dahlia's career flourished in ways she'd never expected. She published research papers, spoke at conferences, and became a respected voice in plant conservation. The programs she ran saved 3 endangered species from extinction, and that success meant more to her than any amount of money ever could. But at the end of every day, what mattered most was coming home to Quentin and their children. Walking into their apartment and being swarmed by kids, feeling Quentin's arms wrap around her, hearing about everyone's day. They'd built something beautiful together, something that had started with a mistaken identity and a splash of coffee, and grew into a love that sustained them both. On quiet nights, after the kids were in bed, they'd sit on their balcony overlooking the city. Quentin would pour them wine, and they'd talk about everything, the easy conversation of people who knew each other deeply. Sometimes they'd sit in comfortable silence, his arm around her shoulders, her head on his chest, listening to the sound of his heartbeat. "I love you," he'd say, like he said every night, the words never losing their weight or meaning. "I love you too," she'd respond, and mean it with every fiber of her being. They were happy. Not in some fairy tale way where everything was perfect, but in the real, messy, beautiful way of people who chose each other every day. Who worked through problems, who supported each other's dreams, who built a family and a life with intention and love. Sometimes Dahlia thought about that morning in the elevator, the coffee cup slipping from her hand, the horrified moment of impact. She thought about how Quentin had been gracious, how he'd thought she was someone she wasn't, how a simple mistake had changed the trajectory of both their lives. She'd moved to this city for a fresh start, nursing a broken heart and determined to focus on herself. She'd never expected to find love again so quickly, and definitely not with the gorgeous millionaire from the penthouse floor. But life had a way of surprising you, of bringing you exactly what you needed when you least expected it. Quentin Lawson had given her everything she didn't know she wanted. A partner who respected her independence while offering unwavering support. A family that felt like home. A love that was steady and sure and strong enough to weather any storm. And all because she'd thrown coffee on a stranger who thought she was his daughter's tutor, but was really just his neighbor. His neighbor and eventually, his everything. Years continued to pass in a blur of school plays and birthday parties, business meetings and research projects, family vacations and quiet Sunday mornings. They watched Sophie graduate high school with honors, head off to college to study environmental policy. Oliver discovered a passion for architecture, spending hours drawing buildings and structures, showing them to Quentin with pride. Rose inherited her mother's love of plants and her father's business sense, already talking about starting her own company someday. Quentin's hair gained gray at the temples, which Dahlia thought made him even more handsome. Her own face showed the passage of time, laugh lines, and the kind of beauty that came from a life well lived. They'd grown older together, navigated the challenges of parenting and careers and just life in general. Through it all, their love remained the constant, the foundation everything else was built on. They still went on dates, still made time for just the two of them. They still kissed goodbye in the morning and hello at night. They still chose each other, over and over again. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Quentin surprised her with a weekend trip, just the two of them. The kids stayed with Dahlia's parents, and they flew to a small coastal town known for its botanical gardens. They spent 2 days walking hand in hand through gardens, talking and laughing and being together. On the last evening, as the sun set over the ocean, Quentin pulled her close. 15 years ago, I thought my life was complete. I had Sophie, I had my company, I had everything I thought I needed. And then you literally crashed into me and I realized I'd been living in black and white. You brought color to everything. Dahlia's eyes filled with tears. You brought me back to life. After everything with my ex, I'd closed myself off. I thought I'd focus on work and that would be enough. But then there you were, this incredible man with kind eyes and a good heart, and you made me want to take a chance again. Best chance I ever took, Quentin said, kissing her softly. Here's to 15 more years and 50 after that, and as many as we can get together. I'll take every single one, Dahlia whispered against his lips. They returned home to chaos, the kids full of stories about their weekend with grandparents. Oliver had built an elaborate structure out of blocks that he was desperate to show his dad. Rose had planted seeds in every pot she could find. Sophie called from college to say she'd joined an environmental activism group and was organizing a campus cleanup event. Life was full and messy and absolutely perfect. Eventually, Sophie graduated college and started working for a non-profit focused on climate policy. She met a kind, passionate man named David who worked in renewable energy. And when she brought him home to meet the family, Dahlia saw the same look in her stepdaughter's eyes that she'd had when she first fell for Quentin. Oliver started college, studying architecture as expected, and came home full of ideas for sustainable building design. He and Quentin would spend hours discussing how development could be done responsibly, balancing profit with environmental impact. Quentin listened to his son's ideas with respect and started implementing some of them in his company's projects. Rose, their youngest, was still in high school but already showing signs of being a force of nature. She started a plant sale fundraiser at school, growing seedlings in their apartment until every surface was covered with green. The fundraiser was so successful that she expanded it, and by her junior year, she'd raised enough money to fund a community garden in an underserved neighborhood. Dahlia watched her children grow and thrive and felt grateful beyond measure. For the family they'd built, for the love that sustained them, for every moment of joy and even the challenges that had made them stronger. Quentin eventually stepped back from day-to-day operations of Lawson Development Group, transitioning to a chairman role that gave him more freedom. He spent more time with Dahlia, traveling to botanical gardens around the world, supporting her work and simply enjoying the life they'd built together. They grew old together, exactly as they'd promised. Their love never dimmed, never faded. If anything, it deepened with time, becoming richer and more complex. They knew each other's stories, each other's scars, each other's dreams. They'd built a life of meaning and purpose together, On their 30th wedding anniversary, surrounded by their children and eventually grandchildren, Quentin stood to give a toast. His voice was still strong, his eyes still sharp, though his hair was fully gray now. 30 years ago, I married the most incredible woman I've ever met. She came into my life unexpectedly, turned it upside down in the best possible way, and has been my partner in everything since. Dahlia, you are my best friend, my greatest love, my home. Thank you for saying yes to that first coffee date. Thank you for saying yes when I proposed. Thank you for saying yes every day since, to this life we've built together. I love you more today than I did 30 years ago, and I'll love you even more tomorrow. Dahlia stood, tears streaming down her face, and kissed her husband in front of their entire family. I love you too. Always have, always will. Their children cheered, their grandchildren giggled, and Dahlia looked around at the family they'd created. All because she'd been running late one morning, juggling too many things, and crashed into a stranger in an elevator. A stranger who thought she was someone she wasn't, but who turned out to be exactly who she needed. Life was funny that way. The best things often came when you least expected them, disguised as mistakes or accidents or simple twists of fate. But Dahlia knew better now. It wasn't fate or accident. It was choice. The choice to take a chance, to be vulnerable, to love and be loved in return. And she'd make that choice again and again, every single day for the rest of her life. With Quentin beside her, with their family around them, with a love that had started with a splash of coffee and grown into something beautiful and lasting and real. They lived their years fully, loving deeply, building a legacy not just of money or success, but of family and love and commitment. And when they were old and gray, sitting together in their home surrounded by decades of memories, they'd look at each other and know they'd done it right. They'd loved well, lived fully, and built something that would last far beyond their years, because in the end, that was what mattered. Not the money or the success or the company or even the impressive conservation work. What mattered was the love, the family, the choice to commit to someone and build a life with them through all the ups and downs and everything in between. Dahlia had found that with Quentin. He'd found it with her. And together, they'd created something extraordinary out of an ordinary moment, a mistaken identity, and a willingness to take a chance on love. It was, she thought, the best decision she'd ever made. And looking at Quentin, seeing the love in his eyes that had never wavered in all their years together, she knew he felt exactly the same way. Their story had started with coffee and confusion, but it had grown into something beautiful. A love story for the ages. A testament to the power of choosing each other, every single day. And a reminder that sometimes the best things in life come from the unexpected moments, the accidents, the times when everything goes wrong but somehow turns out perfectly right.